What's happening, everybody? I always get intrigued when I sit across from somebody and they've got notes. I'm here with Cyril Bernard. How are you this afternoon? It's good to be with you.
I'm doing great. Great to see you, Tom.
Yeah, good to see you too. So, for those of you who've been online and have been watching our coverage of tennis this spring, you will have noted that all of our tennis stories have been presented by Skyscape Vision. And there's a reason for that, because Cyril's daughter, Scarlett, of course, is one of the tennis players for the Westwood varsity tennis team, which is, as we record this, still alive and kicking in the MIAA playoffs. A very talented athlete, and I know you must be super proud of Scarlett, and it's coming to an end. The high school's career is ending. I'm right there with you. I have a senior too. What's that been like in the household here?
Some people are taking the news better than others. I think my wife is just about to have a nervous breakdown every other day. Big change. I have an older son who's about to graduate from college. So Scarlett being the last one out, I think we're ready. She's ready, but I think nerves are a bit high at the moment.
Well, she'll be pretty close. She's going on to play tennis at Roger Williams, which is only a hop, skip, and a jump down the road. So it'll be exciting to have her nearby. And it's been fun to have her as a friend of my daughter. And that's how we were introduced to each other. And she said, listen, my dad does this business where he operates his drone. And I'm like, all right, let's talk. So I popped over here and we had a conversation, and you told me a little bit about how Skyscape Vision was born. But let's share with the public how the company was started. It's almost a passion play for you. So walk people through how we got here.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. I guess my passion for drone started a little bit by accident. Like a lot of people, you see one or two flying around in the park and you go, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder if I could try that. And about 12 years ago, I bought my first drone, and it was very much a toy at the time. You know, I didn't have any aspirations or desire to, doing the drone a commercial endeavor. But lo and behold, I really enjoyed flying them, and they were actually a little easier than I thought. In my earlier days, I had this remote control airplane and helicopter that lasted about 10 minutes before it crashed into a tree or a fence. But the drone somehow stayed up in the air, and I thought it was starting to get pretty good. And time went by. I took it with me on holidays, much to the chagrin of my wife, who basically was saying there's too much stuff to carry with us. And there was always another little suitcase with a drone. But, I started doing more shots. A friend of mine a couple of years ago said, listen, I'm about to put my house on the market. You fly drones. Can you perhaps help me out? And I said, I've never done it before, but why not? I think pretty good shots. Why don't I do this for you? And she sold her house pretty quickly. I'd love to think, the picture and the aerial view, you put the house in a different light than would normally be regular pictures. Fast forward a couple of years, I don't want to bore the audience with everything I've done, my trial and tribulation, but I was in a position essentially to make the jump, spend a lot of hours training, a lot of hours getting certified to be a commercial drone pilot. And I now offer my service as a business. And I have a variety of customers ranging from real estate companies to cell tower operations to filmmakers.
All right, I'm going to take those one by one. You already touched on how realtors can benefit from the overhead view. Take me through the cellular companies. How are they using you?
So cellular towers, historically, have been sending guys up these cell towers, pretty high up, pretty dangerous, pretty time consuming. With drones becoming more ubiquitous and around, rather than saying a physical, able-bodied up on the antenna who's going to cost a lot of money and potential for injury, now we're able to utilize drones to essentially take snapshots and identify where equipment could be failing or about to fail. Photography is only one aspect of determining whether the equipment is going to fail. You also have thermal capabilities. So essentially, you're able to detect equipment that overheats or is not operating at optimum capabilities.
You can do that through the drone?
So I can do that through my drone. I have a number of drones, one of which has thermal detection capability.
Wow, that's really cool. And then another thing that jumped out at me is the first digital ad that you ran on Facebook and Instagram with us, through us, focused specifically on how a consumer can benefit from your services by having you assess and help them assess roof damage and gutter damage. So walk us through that.
Sure. So I think that's an area that's being underused, and maybe people don't always think about drones, or perhaps they think they can do it themselves. But an area that, especially in the Northeast, right, where the climate is really tough on the infrastructure of the house, Roof is a common failure point, right? Shingles get old. You might have ice dams and water damage. What you're seeing more and more of, individuals, maybe not 100% trustworthy of their roofing company, right? Maybe they're going to try to stick me with a repair or a new roof that I don't really need. So they hire people like me or like the company Skyscape Vision to do a full-on review and analysis assessment of the roof condition. And that includes, could be a missing shingles or two, but it also could be areas where you find water entry or you find where there's damage to the wood rot. Mm-hmm. Once again, through not just photography, but thermal detections, you're able to actually see hotspots or areas where the roof is failing. So for relatively small expense, right? Rather than going on the ladder, which trust me, I've done this more than once, trying to save a few bucks, saying, "Oh, I'm going to do it myself." You hear stories every year of people falling off ladders, or fights between spouses about who's going up.
Right? Who's holding it? You're not holding it tight enough.
Exactly. So now, for use services, drone services, you essentially can pinpoint where you potentially have problems or about to have problems, and do that fairly rapidly and with the use of a drone.
Now, what I don't want to glance over is something you mentioned in your training, which I've been so intrigued by because you're not the only drone operator I know.
Sure.
You're a pilot, and you have to go through that training to understand all of the rules associated with operating an aircraft.
Correct.
So walk people through that process about why it is that way and how difficult it is to learn all those rules and be aware of following them all the time.
Sure. So there's a process. If you actually want to start flying drones and charge money and essentially run it as a business, you have to part in a Federal Aviation Authority test called the Part 107. And essentially, it's a little surprising because when you go through the training, it's very akin to flying a small Cessna, a small airplane. You need to understand all the rules and regulations on how high you can fly, where you can fly, understanding the effect of weather on your aircraft. Now, of course, the drone is not an airplane. It's a small aviation item that responds similarly to a lot of the weather conditions, but also has to obey by the same rules that are set by the FAA. And I think one of the misconceptions or challenges that a lot of recreational flyers that are not FAA certified might put themselves in harm's way or break the law and get up with very big fines because they haven't followed that training. I could show you the book, but it's like 300 or 400 pages, and there's a lot of things regarding safety, right? It's all about safety, but it's also following the rules. You're not allowed to fly above 400 feet of any structures. Sometimes that limit is much lower if you're near an airport or a essentially protected zone. You cannot take off or land in a national park. That's illegal unless you have special permission. So there are a lot of things that come into play when you fly a drone where, frankly, I think a lot of people are unaware. And the training is actually somewhat gruesome. Once you have the license or the exam, every 2 years you have to take a smaller exam subset, which is called a refresh, to keep your certification active.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And you referenced airport, which comes into play here with Westwood specifically, because we're right near the Norwood Airport. People don't think about that, but I have friends over at Westwood Media Center, and they're like, "Oh, we can't put the drone up there." So what is the zone here around Westwood where you are and aren't allowed to use it?
I could literally get out on my deck here in my home in Westwood and throw a rock at the runway of the Norwood Municipal Airport. To your point, Tom, I'm not allowed to fly here.
So you can't even practice.
I am not allowed. There's one caveat or one gotcha. You have the ability to ask for special permission. So there's an approval process. You need to apply through a portal, and you essentially ask for permission from the FAA to fly. You need to give information such as where, how high, how long, why. Provided you're professional, you have a certification, they grant you the right to fly for a set period of time, which kind of mitigate potential issues associated with being so close to an airport. And most of Westwood, as you know, is not so far. Well, I mean, the southern part is not so far from the Norwood Airport. So that is an issue, potentially.
One of the things I always wonder is just how far a drone can go. So how do you know that you're within your range, and how wide is your range? How far away from your base of operation can a drone fly?
So that's a loaded question, and the answer is it depends. It depends on the physical attributes of the landscape you're flying, whether there are buildings in the way, mountains, trees, etc. It also depends on the type of drone you're flying. You have commercial drones that typically have a better range, at maybe the little toy that you buy for your grandchildren at Christmas. But in general, by law, you have to maintain visual line of sight of your drone.
Okay.
That means at any given time when you fly your drone, you have to have it in your eyesight. If you don't, again, you have to ask for a special permit, and it's considered illegal unless you have special permission.
Got it.
But that's not the answer you ask. The question you're asking how far can you go? So technically, I have currently 3 drones. The one that has the biggest range, unobstructed, can fly about 10 miles away from the remote, from the base.
What's the purpose if you have to keep it within range of sight?
That's a very good point. There's absolutely none unless you have special permission.
Wow, that's wild to me. And when you're learning, you have this very expensive piece of equipment, and I would be scared to death about crashing it or losing it or, making a mistake and it goes, falling in the water or something along those lines. How do you avoid that type of stuff happening as you're learning?
A lot of practice, some good software on the computer that essentially is, you have the Microsoft Flight Simulator for planes. You have similar tools for drones. So, it's kind of knowing your limits and starting baby steps and then increasing the complexity of your flights, the duration of your flights, being very mindful of the conditions around you, the wind, the rain, changing conditions, a little bit of luck, and a little bit of praying that nothing terrible will happen. Because it's not just things like wind or rain. When I fly around the cell phone towers, you get radiation from the antennas that can actually mess with your control system. So you have to also manage that.
Yeah.
And to add salt to the wound, you have what's called magnetic storms every now and then. It's just a natural occurrence on the planet, on Earth. And depending on where you are and what time of the year, those magnetic storms, pardon my French, sometimes can impact your connectivity and your ability to fly the drone safely without losing control. So, a lot of moving parts, but it makes it exciting and also an expensive sport if you do happen to crash.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple things I love seeing every year. You probably have a favorite too, so let's each do this. One of my favorite drone shots is when someone throws a drone up near a fireworks display and they're up in the air as the fireworks are exploding around them. That's personally one of my faves. Do you have a favorite kind of typical drone type of shot?
So I do like those kind of cinematical shots where there's like a reveal or a traveling or panoramic view that's moving. So I think that's, from a purely artistic point of view, that's kind of my favorite shot. I am dabbling with night photography or night drone photography, which is actually fairly more complex because you have to have the right lens and the right aperture, the right settings to make sure you capture. And fireworks are actually notoriously difficult to capture it properly due to the low light environment and then the really brightness of the fireworks when they do go off. But that's something I'd look forward to do at some point.
Okay, I'm just picking your brain about stuff that, as it relates to drones. You hear and see now these unbelievably complex drone shows, which, you're not doing. But walk me through that. Like, how does that work where there are hundreds of drones that they can program to look like the American flag or the face of a president or something like that?
No, it's really cool. I went to Disney World a couple of years ago, and they had one of those drone shows, and they were making all kinds of interesting animated views of Disney characters, and it was amazing. I don't profess to know all the ins and outs because, to your point, I don't do this. But my understanding is it's all software driven, right? So they lay out thousands of drones, literally hundreds, if not thousands of drones. Yeah. Everything is well choreographed, right? They have a map on the ground, literally very precisely of where each of the drone is supposed to go. And then it's all kind of pre-programmed to go up and then light up at certain times to create shapes, give the impression of 3 dimensions and motion in the air. It's really cool.
Let's talk specifically and directly to our neighbors here in Westwood. Consumers, residents. How could they benefit from your services? What are you telling them? Like, hey, you should consider giving me a ring because I can help you this way.
That's a great question. I think the value add, anybody can take a picture. I think where we stand apart, or Skyscape Vision stands apart, is I try to solve a problem or tell a story. When I say solve a problem, preventive maintenance, right? We talked a little bit about roof and gutter inspection. So that's solving a potential problem before it happens, preventive maintenance. And telling a story, anybody can take a good picture, but what is it for? What are you trying to solve, right? For instance, for real estate, you're trying to sell a story. what's the value out of the house? What's the selling point? Is it close to a park? Is it close to water? What do you want to emphasize? What do you want to minimize? So when you piece together photography, video to really put the emphasis on the story, on selling, a positive, that really makes us stand out. And I think a lot of planning goes into it, but I think the end result usually speaks for itself, and that's why my customers are happy.
Are you happy with where you are right now, and where do you see yourself in the next year, 2 years?
Yeah. So I was before doing the drone business, I was a salesperson at IBM, and what I've learned throughout my career is I can always do better. Same goes with the business, right? It's starting to pick up. I think there's a lot of room for growth. I think my biggest challenge here, and I work very closely with you, Tom, is getting more awareness around my services and getting the name out. Mm-hmm. And I think when that starts to take off, I think the business will grow pretty exponentially. I look forward to the day where I have to hire additional pilots. Right now it's me, myself, and I. But I think we're on the right trajectory here. I think there is going to be growth in services, growth in demand, just a matter of kind of syncing the demand and awareness of my company and my services to really help the business grow.
Well, me, myself, and I, typically 3 very reliable employees, right? I know that well. And you will see Skyscape Vision not only in the pages of Westwood Living every month. You'll see this business profile coming up in the July issue of Westwood Living. And just go to westwoodlivingsports.com and go through the backlog of any tennis story from this past spring. And every single one of those tennis stories was brought to you by Cyril and Skyscape Vision. So we're very appreciative of that. And I love partnering with friends and neighbors, trying to help them pursue their dream and fulfill their passion. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any website you want people to go to check out more information?
Sure. So the website is www.skyscapevision.com.
It's actually a very nice website, which has beautiful photography, as you could expect. So go check it out. And as always, if there's someone else you want me to have a conversation with, just reach out. Send me an email, tleyden@bestversionmedia.com. I will find that person, have that conversation, and then share it with you right here on the Westwood Living Podcast Network. But for now, with Cyril Bernard from Skyscape Vision, this is Tom Leyden saying so long, and thanks for listening.